Part 1, The Fall. Samantha Sam Blake stood backstage at the height of her career, a powerhouse in the world of professional racing. She had it all, a garage filled with high-end cars, a string of sponsors, and a reputation that few could touch. Known for her fierce attitude and unrivaled skill behind the wheel, Sam was a force to be reckoned with on the track. Every race felt like a challenge she could conquer, and every opponent seemed like just another obstacle she would inevitably leave in her dust. The roar of engines echoed in the distance, the racetrack ahead of her glowing under the lights. Sam's heart raced as she tugged at her racing gloves, her mind focused on the final lap of the championship circuit. Winning tonight would make her a legend, securing her status as one of the greatest racers in history. "Focus, Sam," she whispered to herself, taking a deep breath. "This is your night." But just before stepping out to her car, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Sam, we need to talk," came the voice of her longtime racing coach and mentor, Greg. His usually calm demeanor was tinged with urgency. Sam turned to face him, her eyes narrowed. "Now. I'm about to get out there, Greg. This isn't the time." "It is the time," Greg said, pulling her to the side. "We've got a problem." Sam crossed her arms, trying to shake off the growing tension. "What kind of problem?" Greg hesitated for a moment, his eyes locking with hers. "There's talk going around. People are saying that you're using performance enhancers." For a second, Sam's heart skipped a beat. Her reputation was her everything, and any hint of cheating would destroy it in an instant. "That's a lie. You know I wouldn't do that." Greg's gaze remained firm. "I know, Sam. But rumors like this can spiral out of control. The officials are going to investigate after the race." Sam swallowed hard, but she didn't have time to think about it. The pressure to perform was mounting, and the track was waiting. Her pride wouldn't let her back down now. "I'm clean, Greg. And tonight, I'm winning this race," she said, pushing past him and striding towards her car. Greg didn't argue. He just watched her go, concern written all over his face. He had been with Sam since the beginning of her career and had seen her rise to the top. But he also knew how cutthroat the racing world could be, how easy it was for whispers to become a storm. The race itself started like any other, with Sam taking the lead early on. The adrenaline coursed through her veins as she pushed her car to its limits, feeling the thrill of speed and control. But as the laps continued, something felt off. Her hands began to tremble on the steering wheel, and her vision blurred at the edges. It wasn't fatigue, it was something else. Sam fought to keep her focus, but her body wasn't responding the way it should. With only 2 laps to go, her car swerved unexpectedly, and before she could correct it, she spun out of control, crashing into the guardrail. The world blurred into chaos. Metal crunched. The roar of engines was drowned out by the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. And then, silence. When Sam woke up, it wasn't in the winner's circle. It was in a hospital room, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling her nose. Her head throbbed, and the weight of reality crashed down on her. She had lost the race, lost everything. Greg sat at her bedside, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "You're awake," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" Sam blinked, trying to piece together what had happened. What went wrong?" Greg's face tightened, and he hesitated before answering. "They found something in your system, Sam. Something you didn't put there." Sam's heart sank. "What?" "No, that's impossible. I didn't take anything." Greg nodded, his jaw clenched. "I know you didn't. But someone sabotaged you. The officials found traces of performance enhancers in your blood. They're talking about banning you from the circuit." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Sam's career, everything she had worked for, was on the verge of being ripped away from her. "I didn't do this," Sam whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I believe you," Greg said. "But we need to figure out who did." Part 2, A Tarnished Name. The next few days were a whirlwind of chaos. The media had caught wind of the scandal, and Sam's name was plastered across every headline. Champion racer accused of doping was splashed on TV screens and news outlets, and the public ate it up. To the world, she had gone from a racing legend to a cheater overnight. Sam spent hours locked in her apartment, avoiding the phone calls, the messages, and the incessant knock of reporters at her door. Even her closest friends had started to question her, and that betrayal cut deeper than anything else. She had spent years building her career from the ground up, and now it was all crumbling around her because of a lie. Greg, who had always been her pillar of strength, was the only one who stayed by her side, determined to clear her name. But even he was struggling to keep hope alive. The racing world was unforgiving, and once the shadow of suspicion fell on a racer, it rarely lifted. "Sam, you need to fight this," Greg said one afternoon, sitting across from her in the living room of her now quiet apartment. "We can't let them get away with this." Sam stared at the floor, her hands clenched into fists. "How am I supposed to fight this, Greg?" "The tests came back positive. The officials don't care about the truth. All they see is the evidence." "They won't care unless we make them care," Greg said, his voice firm. "We need to find out who did this. We need to prove that someone sabotaged you." Sam shook her head, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "And what if we can't? What if my career is over?" Greg leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Then you fight anyway. Because that's who you are, Sam. You don't give up, not now, not ever." Sam took a deep breath, trying to summon the fire that had once driven her. But it was hard. Harder than she ever thought it would be. The betrayal, the public scrutiny, it was all too much. But Greg was right. She couldn't just sit here and let it all slip away without a fight. "Okay," she said quietly. "Where do we start?" Greg's expression softened with relief. "We start by figuring out who had access to your car and your team before the race. Someone tampered with your system, and they didn't do it alone. There's a trail, we just have to find it." Sam nodded, though doubt still gnawed at her. She wasn't sure how they would find the person responsible, but she knew she couldn't give up. Not yet. As they began to dig into the days leading up to the race, they quickly realized how many people had access to Sam's car and equipment. Her pit crew, the officials, even the staff at the track. Any one of them could have tampered with her system, and finding the person responsible felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. But Greg refused to let them get discouraged. He made calls, asked questions, and began to put together a list of potential suspects, people who had motive, people who had something to gain by taking Sam out of the race. One name kept coming up: Logan Rivers, a rival racer who had always been jealous of Sam's success. He had finished second in the championship standings for 3 years in a row, and there were rumors that he was growing desperate to finally take the top spot. Desperation could lead people to do terrible things, and Logan had always been known for his ruthlessness on and off the track. But proving Logan was involved was another matter entirely. They had no solid evidence, just a gut feeling and a few circumstantial leads. "I know he's behind this," Sam said one night, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "I just don't know how to prove it." "We will," Greg assured her. "Logan's cocky. He's bound to slip up somewhere." Sam clenched her fists, anger surging through her veins. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let someone like Logan destroy everything she had built. "I won't let him win," she said, her voice hard with determination. "I'll clear my name. One way or another." Part 3: Redemption in the Making. With renewed resolve, Sam and Greg continued their investigation, following every lead, no matter how small. They spoke to members of her pit crew, questioned officials at the racetrack, and even reached out to other racers who might have seen or heard something suspicious on the day of the race. Every conversation felt like a step forward, but they were still no closer to finding the proof they needed. But then, one afternoon, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sam was sitting at her kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, when an anonymous email appeared in her inbox. The subject line read, "I know what happened." Her heart raced as she clicked it open, her pulse quickening with anticipation. The message was brief, but it was enough to make her sit up straight. "I was there when they spiked your system. Logan paid off one of the track mechanics to slip the enhancers into your drink before the race. Meet me at the old garage on Elm Street tonight at 8 if you want proof." Sam's hands trembled as she stared at the screen, a mixture of hope and suspicion swirling in her chest. Could this be real? Could this anonymous source actually have the proof she needed? She immediately called Greg, who, despite his own skepticism, agreed that they needed to check it out. It could be a trap, or it could be the lead they had been waiting for. That evening, they drove to the garage on Elm Street, the tension thick between them. The garage was an old, abandoned building that had once been used by local racers for underground competitions. Now, it was a relic of a bygone era, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in graffiti. Sam's stomach churned as they pulled up to the building, the headlights of Greg's car casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. "This could be it," Greg said quietly, glancing at her. "Or it could be nothing. Be careful." Sam nodded, her jaw set. She wasn't afraid, just determined. As they stepped out of the car, the door to the garage creaked open, and a figure emerged from the shadows. Part 4: The Informant. The figure that stepped out of the shadows was a short, wiry man in his early 30s, dressed in a dark hoodie with his hands stuffed into his pockets. He looked nervous, glancing around the empty garage as if he expected someone to be watching. The dim light from the street lamp outside barely illuminated his face, but Sam could see the anxiety etched into his features. "You Sam Blake?" the man asked, his voice low and raspy. Sam exchanged a glance with Greg, her senses on high alert. "Yeah, that's me." "And you are?" The man shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable. "Name's Billy. I used to work at the track, one of the mechanics. I was there the night of the race. Saw some things I shouldn't have." Sam's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "What did you see, Billy?" Billy hesitated, glancing around again as if he were afraid someone might overhear. "Look, I don't have long. I just need you to know I wasn't part of it. I didn't want anything to do with it, but I saw what they did." "Logan. Logan paid one of the guys on your crew to spike your system with enhancers before the race." Sam's stomach dropped. It was what she had suspected all along, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the gut. "Who?" Greg asked, stepping forward, his voice firm. "Who did Logan pay off?" Billy swallowed, his eyes darting between Sam and Greg. "A guy named Marco. He works the pit crew for a lot of racers, not just yours. He's been in the business for years, but he's dirty. Logan offered him enough money to make sure you were out of the picture that night." Sam clenched her fists at her sides, anger boiling just beneath the surface. "And you saw this happen? You can prove it?" Billy nodded quickly. "I didn't want to get involved, but I overheard them talking before the race. I saw Marco slip something into your water bottle while you were getting ready. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I knew it wasn't right." Sam's mind raced. If Billy was telling the truth, this could be the break they needed to clear her name. But she had to be sure. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice hard. "If you knew what was going on, why didn't you say something sooner?" Billy's face twisted in guilt. "I was scared, okay? Logan's got a lot of pull in the racing world, and I didn't want to lose my job. But I couldn't sit with it anymore. It's been eating me up inside." Sam studied him for a long moment, her instincts telling her that he was genuinely afraid. If Logan had orchestrated this, then Billy was risking his own safety by coming forward. "What do you want from us?" Greg asked, his tone cautious. "You could have gone to the officials." Billy shook his head vehemently. "No way. I'm not going on record with this. I just wanted you to know what happened. You deserve to know the truth." Sam felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had the lead she needed, but without Billy's testimony, it wasn't enough. The officials wouldn't reopen the investigation based on her word alone. She needed more. "We need proof," Sam said firmly, her eyes locking with Billy's. "You're the only one who can help us clear my name." Billy shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I can't get involved like that. If Logan finds out I'm talking to you, he won't," Greg cut in. "We'll make sure of it. But we need your help, Billy. You saw what happened. You can help Sam get her career back." Billy hesitated, clearly torn. He wanted to do the right thing, but the fear of retaliation from Logan and his people was holding him back. Sam could see the conflict playing out on his face. "Please," Sam said quietly, her voice filled with desperation. "I've already lost everything because of this. You're the only one who can help me get it back." For a long moment, Billy said nothing, his eyes darting between Sam and Greg. Then, finally, he sighed and nodded, though his expression remained tense. "I'll see what I can do," he muttered. "I'm not promising anything, but I'll try to get you something you can use." Sam felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew better than to get her hopes up too soon. This was just the first step. They still had a long way to go. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "You don't know what this means to me." Billy gave her a brief nod before turning to leave, his figure disappearing into the shadows of the old garage. As the door creaked shut behind him, Sam let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Greg placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression thoughtful. "It's a start," he said quietly. "But we're not out of the woods yet." Sam nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. They had a lead, but it wasn't enough. If Billy could get them the proof they needed, they might have a shot at clearing her name once and for all. "I'm not giving up," she said, her voice hard with determination. "Not until everyone knows the truth." Part 5: The Pressure Mounts. The next few days were a blur of tension and waiting. Every time Sam's phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat, hoping it was Billy with the evidence they needed. But as time passed with no word from him, her anxiety grew. She knew the longer this dragged on, the harder it would be to clear her name. The media had already moved on to the next big scandal, but her reputation was still in shambles. Greg stayed by her side, encouraging her to keep pushing forward. But even he couldn't hide the worry etched into his features. Without solid proof, it was still just their word against Logan's, and Logan had the upper hand in the racing world. Finally, after nearly a week of radio silence, Sam's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Got what you need. Meet me at the diner on 5th at noon. Bring your guy." Sam's pulse quickened. It had to be Billy. She immediately called Greg, her voice filled with urgency. "He's got something. He wants to meet at a diner downtown." Greg didn't hesitate. "I'll pick you up in 10. When they arrived at the small, run-down diner on 5th Street, Sam's nerves were on edge. The place was nearly empty, save for a few regulars sipping coffee at the counter. Billy sat in a booth at the back, his hood pulled up over his head as if he didn't want to be seen. He looked up as they approached, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Sit," he muttered, gesturing to the seats across from him. Sam slid into the booth, her heart racing. "What do you have for us?" Billy glanced around again before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small flash drive. He placed it on the table, sliding it across to Greg. "That's everything," Billy said in a low voice. "Recordings of Logan and Marco talking about the deal, texts, emails. It's all there. Enough to prove that they set you up." Sam's breath caught in her throat. "Are you sure?" Billy nodded, though his expression remained tense. Yeah, I got what I could. But you need to be careful. Logan's not gonna be happy when he finds out this is out there. Greg picked up the flash drive, his eyes narrowing. This is enough to clear Sam's name? Billy shrugged. Should be. But you'll still have to get the officials to reopen the investigation. Sam felt a surge of hope, but it was tempered by the weight of the situation. They finally had the proof they needed, but getting the racing officials to act on it wouldn't be easy. Logan had deep connections in the racing world, and convincing the higher-ups to turn against him would be an uphill battle. Thank you, Billy, Sam said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. You've done the right thing. Billy nodded, but he didn't meet her gaze. Just be careful, okay? Logan's got a lot of people in his pocket. You don't want to make enemies with the wrong folks. Sam understood the warning, but she wasn't afraid. She had already lost everything once. She had nothing left to lose. After leaving the diner, Greg drove them back to his apartment, where they immediately plugged the flash drive into his computer. Sam's heart pounded in her chest as they scrolled through the files, audio recordings, text messages, incriminating emails. It was all there, just like Billy had promised. This is it, Greg said, his voice filled with disbelief. This is enough to clear your name. Sam felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew the fight wasn't over yet. They still had to get the racing officials to listen, to reopen the investigation and clear her record. And that wouldn't be easy with someone as powerful as Logan standing in their way. But Sam was done playing it safe. She had the proof she needed, and she wasn't going to let anyone, Logan, the officials, or anyone else, take her career away from her. I'm going to win this, Sam said, her voice hard with determination. No matter what it takes. Part 6, Taking a Stand. The following morning, Sam and Greg gathered all the evidence from Billy and prepared to take the next step. Sam's entire future rested on the contents of that flash drive. As they reviewed the files once more, a weight settled in her chest. This was it, her one shot at redemption. But she knew, just as Greg did, that exposing Logan Rivers wasn't going to be easy. His influence in the racing world ran deep, and people who crossed him rarely came out unscathed. Sam stared at the computer screen, her face set with grim determination. We need to get this in front of the racing officials. The sooner, the better. Greg nodded. I've already scheduled a meeting with the league's ethics committee. They're the ones who can reopen the investigation. But we need to be careful, Logan might already have ears inside that room. Let him try, Sam said, her voice hard with resolve. I'm not backing down. Not this time. The ethics committee meeting was scheduled for the next afternoon, and Sam's nerves were running high. The outcome of this meeting would determine whether she could clear her name or whether she would be banned from racing for good. The thought of never stepping onto a track again filled her with dread, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Greg parked the car outside the league's headquarters, and as they stepped out, Sam noticed the group of reporters lingering by the entrance. Word had spread quickly that she was attempting to appeal her case, and the media was eager for any update. Sam Blake. "Do you have any comment on the doping allegations?" one reporter shouted, thrusting a microphone in her face as she approached the doors. Sam didn't slow her stride, her face set in stone as she ignored the barrage of questions. She wasn't here to answer to the media, she was here to prove her innocence. Once inside, they were greeted by a representative of the league's ethics committee, a middle-aged man named John Weiss. He led them down a long hallway toward a conference room where the hearing would take place. "We've reviewed your request to present new evidence," Weiss said as they walked. "You understand that this meeting is your one chance to make your case. If the committee finds the evidence insufficient, there won't be another opportunity." Sam nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I understand." Weiss opened the door to the conference room, revealing a long table where 5 members of the ethics committee sat, each of them reviewing documents and notes in front of them. At the head of the table sat Martha Ellison, the head of the committee, a stern woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. Sam had heard stories about her. Ellison didn't take kindly to athletes who tried to cheat the system, and she had no patience for excuses. "Ms. Blake, Mr. Harris," Ellison said, motioning for them to take their seats. "Let's get started." Greg handed the flash drive to Weiss, who plugged it into the room's projector. The files appeared on the screen for the committee to review: audio recordings of Logan's conversations with Marco, text messages coordinating the tampering of Sam's water bottle, and financial transactions that linked Logan directly to the bribe. For a long moment, the room was silent as the committee members read through the documents. Sam's heart raced as she watched them, trying to gauge their reactions. But their faces remained unreadable, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Ellison cleared her throat and turned to Sam, her expression as cold as ever. "Ms. Blake, this evidence is compelling, but we need more than this to reopen the investigation. If this Marco individual was involved, we need his testimony. Without that, we can't act on these documents alone." Sam felt her stomach drop. She had been hoping the recordings would be enough to sway the committee, but it seemed like they needed something more, something they didn't have. "Marco won't talk," Greg said, his voice tense. "He's working for Logan. He's not going to testify against him." Ellison raised an eyebrow. "Then it seems we have a problem. Without a witness, the evidence is circumstantial. We would be risking the integrity of the league if we overturned a ruling based solely on this." Sam's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. They had everything they needed: proof that Logan had sabotaged her, proof that Marco had tampered with her system. And yet, it still wasn't enough. "You can't just let this go," Sam said, her voice rising in frustration. "Logan rigged that race. He paid Marco to frame me, and now my career is on the line because of it. You can't seriously be telling me you're going to do nothing." Ellison's sharp gaze shifted to Sam, and for a moment, the room was deadly silent. "This committee has to operate on facts, Ms. Blake," Ellison said calmly. "I understand your frustration, but we cannot base decisions on assumptions or emotions. If you want us to act, you'll need to find Marco and convince him to testify." Sam clenched her fists under the table, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had come so far, and yet it still felt like the system was stacked against her. But Greg placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent reminder to stay calm. "We'll find Marco," Greg said firmly, his voice steady. "And when we do, you'll get your testimony." Ellison gave a curt nod. "Then we will reconvene when you have something more concrete. Until then, there's nothing further we can do." Part 7: A Desperate Search. Sam stormed out of the building, frustration boiling inside her as she ignored the reporters still hounding her for a statement. How could it not be enough? She had brought them proof, real evidence, and they still wanted more. She felt like she was stuck in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Greg followed her outside, his face set with determination. "We'll find Marco. We know he's the key to all this." "Yeah, and where are we supposed to find him, Greg?" Sam snapped, her frustration spilling over. "He's in Logan's pocket. He's not going to just show up and confess." Greg was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "We'll track him down. There's always a way." Sam sighed, the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. She knew Greg was right, they couldn't give up. But the road ahead felt impossible. That night, they began their search for Marco. Greg reached out to contacts in the racing world, trying to gather information on his whereabouts. But Marco had gone underground, likely on Logan's orders. No one had seen him in weeks, and it seemed like he had disappeared without a trace. Days passed with no new leads, and Sam's frustration continued to grow. Every time they hit a dead end, she felt the hope of clearing her name slipping further out of reach. But she refused to give up, even when the odds seemed stacked against her. Then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a break came from an unexpected source. It was late one evening when Sam's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "If you're still looking for Marco, I might know where to find him. But it'll cost you." Sam's heart raced as she read the message, her mind spinning with possibilities. Was it a trap? Or was this the lead they had been waiting for? She immediately called Greg, who agreed that they needed to follow up, but with caution. If this was a setup, they couldn't afford to walk into it blindly. Sam responded to the message, her fingers trembling as she typed, "Where and when?" A reply came quickly, "Tomorrow. 10 a.m. at the old racetrack on the outskirts of town. Bring cash." Sam's stomach churned. The old racetrack had been abandoned for years, a relic of a different era. It was the perfect place for a shady deal. But if it meant finding Marco, she was willing to take the risk. Part 8: The Meeting. The next morning, Sam and Greg arrived at the old racetrack, the sun just beginning to rise over the crumbling grandstands. The place was deserted, its once bustling atmosphere now replaced by silence and decay. Weeds had grown through the cracks in the pavement, and the rusted remains of old cars littered the infield. Greg scanned the area, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Keep your guard up, Sam. This could be a setup." Sam nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. Every instinct told her to be cautious, but the thought of finally finding Marco, of finally getting the testimony she needed, drove her forward. They waited in silence for what felt like hours, though it had only been a few minutes. Then, from the far end of the track, a figure appeared. As the man approached, Sam's breath caught in her throat. It was Marco. He looked haggard, his face lined with stress and fear. His clothes were rumpled, and his eyes darted around nervously, as if he expected someone to jump out at any moment. "You're late," Marco muttered as he reached them, his voice low. "We're here, aren't we?" Sam shot back, her anger barely contained. "You've got information. Let's hear it." Marco glanced over his shoulder, his paranoia palpable. "You don't understand. This is dangerous for me. Logan doesn't play around, and if he finds out I'm talking to you, he won't," Sam cut in, her voice sharp. "You've already crossed the line by meeting us here. You're in this now. So either tell us what you know, or we're walking away, and you can deal with Logan on your own." Marco's eyes widened in fear, but Sam knew she had to play hardball. This was her chance to take Logan down and clear her name, and she wasn't about to let Marco slip through her fingers. After a tense moment, Marco sighed and ran a hand through his messy hair. "Fine. I'll talk." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled envelope, shoving it into Greg's hands. "There's a USB drive inside. It's got everything: emails, voice memos, payments Logan sent to me, and recordings from that night. You'll see the deal we made. It was all Logan's plan. He wanted you out of the picture, and he paid me to make sure it happened." Sam's heart pounded as she stared at the envelope in Greg's hands. This was the proof they needed. The final piece of the puzzle. "What about the drugs?" Greg asked, his voice steady. "Did you spike Sam's water?" Marco swallowed hard, nodding reluctantly. "Yeah, Logan had someone on the inside give me the stuff. I slipped it into your bottle when you weren't looking. You were supposed to be disqualified after the race, but then you crashed, and it didn't matter. Logan's plan went too far." Sam clenched her fists, anger surging through her veins. "Why now? Why are you coming clean now, Marco?" Marco's gaze flicked nervously between Sam and Greg. "Look, Logan's going to take me out anyway. I've seen what he does to people who cross him. I figured I might as well get out ahead of it. Maybe if you take him down, I can slip away before he comes for me." Sam narrowed her eyes, weighing his words. She didn't trust Marco, not completely, but the fear in his voice was real. And the envelope in Greg's hands could be the key to everything. "You testify," Sam said firmly. "In front of the committee. That's the only way this works." Marco's face paled. "No way. I told you, if Logan finds out he'll know soon enough," Greg interjected. "Once we show the committee what's on that USB, Logan's going to be finished. You might as well protect yourself by helping us." Marco's shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew they were right. If he didn't testify, he would still be a loose end for Logan to deal with. His only shot at survival was aligning himself with Sam and Greg. "Fine," Marco muttered. "I'll testify. But you'd better have a plan to keep me safe." Sam nodded. "We'll figure something out. But first, we're taking Logan down." Part 9, Confrontation. The next morning, Sam and Greg presented the new evidence to the ethics committee, this time armed with the damning recordings and Marco's agreement to testify. The members of the committee listened intently as the incriminating audio played, their expressions growing more serious by the second. Logan's smug voice, giving explicit instructions to frame Sam, was undeniable. When the recording ended, the room was silent. Martha Ellison, the head of the committee, was the first to speak. "This evidence is substantial," she said, her sharp eyes locking onto Sam's. "But you're asking a lot, Ms. Blake. You're asking us to overturn an official ruling, to clear your name and publicly implicate a racer who's been part of this league for years." Sam stood tall, her voice steady. "I'm asking for the truth to come out. Logan Rivers sabotaged me, and you've heard the proof. My career was destroyed because of his lies. You owe it to the sport, to the fans, to do the right thing." Ellison studied her for a long moment before nodding. "We'll reopen the investigation. The committee will convene for a formal hearing. If Marco is willing to testify under oath, we'll move forward with the charges." Sam felt a surge of relief wash over her. They had done it. The investigation was back on. But the victory was short-lived. As Sam and Greg left the league headquarters later that day, they found themselves face to face with Logan Rivers. He was leaning against his sleek sports car in the parking lot, his eyes cold and calculating as he watched them approach. Well, Logan drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who's trying to play the hero." Sam's jaw tightened, but she refused to back down. "It's over, Logan. We have everything, your emails, your recordings. Marco's going to testify. You're finished." Logan's expression darkened, but he didn't lose his composure. "You think a few recordings and a scumbag like Marco are enough to take me down? You're more naive than I thought." "Logan, it's over," Greg said, stepping forward. "You can't buy your way out of this one." Logan's gaze flicked to Greg, a sneer curling his lips. "Maybe not. But I've got connections, people in high places. You'll be surprised how far I can go." Sam clenched her fists, fighting the urge to punch Logan right then and there. He wasn't afraid, and that infuriated her. Even with the walls closing in, Logan was still playing the part of the untouchable racer. "I won't let you destroy my career," Sam said, her voice low but filled with steel. "Not anymore. You can try all the tricks you want, but the truth is coming out." Logan's smile faded, replaced by something colder, more dangerous. "We'll see about that." With one last glare, Logan got into his car and sped out of the parking lot, leaving Sam and Greg standing in his wake. "He's scared," Greg said quietly. "He knows he's losing control." Sam nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Logan wasn't finished yet. He was too calculating, too powerful to go down without a fight. "We have to be ready," she muttered. "Whatever his next move is, we need to be one step ahead." Part 10, The Final Fight. The day of the formal hearing arrived, and Sam found herself once again facing the ethics committee, this time with the full weight of the evidence behind her. Marco had agreed to testify, though he was visibly shaken as he took the stand. The tension in the room was palpable as the committee members listened to his account of Logan's plan, of the bribe, of the drugs he had slipped into Sam's water. Sam watched as Logan sat across the room, his expression unreadable. He no longer held the same smug confidence he had displayed in the parking lot. The walls were closing in on him, and for the first time, Sam could see the cracks in his armor. When Marco finished his testimony, the committee recessed to deliberate. Sam and Greg waited in silence, the minutes stretching on like hours. This was it, the moment that would determine whether she could reclaim her career or whether Logan would walk away unscathed. Finally, the committee returned. Martha Ellison, with her ever-serious expression, addressed the room. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimony, the Ethics Committee has reached a decision. Sam's heart pounded in her chest as Ellison continued. The committee has found sufficient evidence to clear Ms. Blake of all charges related to performance-enhancing drugs. Furthermore, we will be launching a full investigation into Mr. Logan Rivers for violations of the League's Code of Conduct, including bribery and sabotage. Sam's breath caught in her throat. She had done it. She had cleared her name. But Ellison wasn't finished. Effective immediately, Logan Rivers is suspended from all league activities, pending the outcome of the investigation. Sam glanced over at Logan, expecting him to explode in anger, but instead, he remained eerily calm. His expression was blank, his eyes cold and detached, as if he had already accepted his fate. The room was silent as the committee adjourned, leaving Sam and Greg standing in the aftermath of the ruling. For a moment, Sam didn't know what to feel. Relief? Triumph? Or just exhaustion? "You did it," Greg said, clapping her on the shoulder. "You're back." Sam let out a shaky breath, the weight of everything finally hitting her. "Yeah," she whispered. "I'm back." Part 11, A New Beginning. In the days following the hearing, the racing world buzzed with news of Logan's suspension and the official clearing of Sam's name. The media, once so quick to label her as a cheater, now shifted their focus to Logan's downfall, and Sam was thrust back into the spotlight, but this time as a symbol of perseverance and resilience. As she prepared for her first race since the scandal, Sam felt a mixture of emotions. She was grateful for the chance to race again, to prove to herself and the world that she belonged on the track. But she also knew that things would never be the same. The innocence she had once brought to the sport was gone, replaced by a hard-earned understanding of the darker side of competition. But that was okay. She had faced the worst, and she had come out stronger. On the day of the race, Sam stood in the pit, watching as her team prepped her car. The familiar roar of engines filled the air, and the excitement of the crowd buzzed in the distance. But this time, there was no fear, no doubt. She was ready. Greg approached, a proud smile on his face. "You ready to show them what you're made of?" Sam grinned, pulling on her racing gloves. "More than ever." As she climbed into the driver's seat, the weight of everything she had gone through settled over her, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was just a reminder of how far she had come, how much she had fought for. The green flag waved, and Sam's engine roared to life. This was her moment, her road to redemption. And she wasn't looking back.